There's no doubt about it. This is hands down the best resin printer I have ever used. Though it's also been one of the most difficult printers I've had to review in a while. And there's an early version of this script where it's little more than notes of complaints and whinges I've had along the way, but as I've spent more time with this unit, each of those initial issues has been steadily whittled down to the point I've realised this whole rather different approach is genuinely more sensible than anything we've seen before in so many ways. And no, I'm not just trying to get your attention with the thumbnail. Well, I am trying to get your attention, but that's not all I'm doing. And this is not a typical clickbait for attention video. I'm very serious about it. For ages, people have used the "this is the only bamboo comparator or competitor" thumbnails, and I'm pretty sure I've done it. Yeah, it's all designed to get video clicks. When the truth is, at least in the FDM world, there is no competitor to those machines, and those which are clearly attempting to emulate bamboo are so far just embarrassing themselves. But in the resin scene, UltraCraft is, so far, the only company to have released a resin printer, clearly showing they understand the same consumer needs as bamboo. Because this printer isn't chasing resolution, nor is it chasing speed. It's making high-quality resin printing easier and more accessible by putting all of their focus on the end-user experience. And that's exactly why bamboo are crushing, well, actually destroying the FDM space right now. Will the UltraCraft Reflex do the same in resin? Well, I think there's one aspect of their approach which is going to stop them. Let's see if you can spot it before we get to the end. Hi, I'm Ross and this is Fohammer Videos. So you may or may not know I've already covered this printer in a preview video. I recommend you watch that so you know the features of this machine. However, in that video, as it was just a prototype unit and a preview, I avoided providing any conclusions on the hardware or system in general, so let me give you that now as a whistle-stop tour. And I'd like to say up front, if you do want to buy this incredible machine, I'd appreciate you using my affiliate link in the description of this video before your purchase. Yes, I'll make a commission on the sale, it's at no cost to you, but it also shows HeyGears how important my video was for them. That's enough blatant self-promotion, let's move on. So HeyGears have now sent me a production unit, which I swapped my prototype with and sent back the original. Though I couldn't actually see any mechanical differences in these machines, and they suggested the changes are mostly, if not entirely, in the software and firmware side of things. Now, in terms of build quality, this is hands down, and I'm going to say hands down a lot because I'm not very articulate, this is hands down the best resin printer I have ever touched. It literally makes every other printer I've ever handled before it look like a toy. And I'm sure you'll agree it's got this gorgeous, sleek industrial design with its metal and plastic body, along with an incredibly dark amber lid, which, now to be fair, on the negative side of things, does make it hard to see through to monitor your prints. There are some orange lights inside the machine, but they just really don't help with visibility. They do, however, look cool. And I know you can't see it so well on camera, but you can tell the build quality of this unit just from the first time you open the lid and see just how sturdy and well built and well mechanized the hinges are. Forgive my gushing, but it's genuine, this thing literally oozes with quality. So to save time going forward, every time I show a feature of this machine, just assume that I'm also telling you it's the best of such a thing I've ever seen on a similar 3D printer. Like, for example, the interface. This 7-inch capacitive, highly responsive touch panel is larger and higher resolution than some of the curing LCDs inside some of my cheaper small printers. And the actual interface itself is by far the most intuitive interface I've ever used on a resin printer. Clear to understand submenus, well-translated options, and an incredibly in-depth settings list. And whilst it's printing, it gives you all the info you need in regard to progress, clearly and concisely. So, let's have a look inside. The build plate is one of the most solid and robust plates I've ever seen, with decent large handles, and it attaches to the Z-rail with a large and firm pull-down clamp. This also comes pre-leveled and pre-zeroed, and the printer even has gyroscopic sensors in the bed mechanics to determine just how accurate the leveling is down to the nearest 10 microns. These sensors can also read the peeling force when pulling resin from the release film, so the printer dynamically adjusts lift speeds to ensure a successful print. The Z-arm runs on a smooth and thick ball screw to avoid any juddery motion, and the vat here is also a step above anything else I've seen, with its smooth metal frame, and this also just clamps into place thanks to 2 levers either side. And if you want more from the vat, it's also got a built-in heater for the most efficient form of warming your resin, again ensuring a successful and sharp print by curing the resin at optimal temperature. Now, if you're familiar with other resin vats, you might notice the two extra protrusions on this frame that don't come on most others, though the front one probably should. This is a very useful spout, used for pouring resin back into bottles. Most printers just have resin dripping down the side and under the vat when you try and pour it back in. And the other protrusion on the back, I'll come back to shortly. Interface-wise, you've got a USB port on the front right side of the unit, though I've never once needed this and I'll explain why in a mo. You also have an Ethernet socket on the back, and yes, the printer does come with Wi-Fi too. And this is because you've got fully integrated local and remote connectivity with the printer for sending files and monitoring the progress. And setting this up with the HeyGears service is really simple because you've got a non-intrusive phone companion app which is designed to do little more than set up and monitor the printer. There's no desperate crappy storefront here, it's all about dedicated printer management. And before I really show off the key features of the printer, let's quickly talk about the wash and cure solutions that they sent me. Now, the cure station is amazing. Okay, just stick with me, not all of this video is positive, we'll get to it, but the cure station, like I said, amazing. In fact, once I got it, it's been the only cure station I've used, and as daft as it sounds, one of the main reasons is because the door opens at the front. Look, it's a tiny thing I know, but it means I can sit crap on top of it, which I can't do with any of the ones that have got a door on top. It just makes more sense that these things are built like microwaves, right? Now, internally, it gets better. It is completely reflective and has space enough that I can even fit this Perspex cake shelf that I got from AliExpress so that I can have multi-tiered curing of numerous small parts. And not only does this unit have a cure function, but you can also use it as a small baking oven too, up to 80 degrees Celsius. Now, you can use this to dry your resin models post-wash, but I tend to prefer to air dry them, and I actually use this heater function to quickly dry paint on my minis when I'm painting them. Now, as a somewhat semi-pro resin printer person, I do love that I have this, but most people out there will crap themselves when they see the price of this unit alone. Does it lessen the sting if I tell you it's got Wi-Fi too, so you can monitor how many curing and heating cycles it's performed? Yeah, I didn't think so. Now, yes, I love it, I absolutely love it, but mine was free, so you do you. Now, on the cheaper side of these post-production accessories is the Washbox, which, well, I can't lie to you, I think is utterly stupid. Now, don't get me wrong, I kinda like where they were going with this, but I honestly feel this is way too over-engineered. You see, instead of a high-frequency ultrasonic cleaner or an impeller-driven cyclonic wash station, HeyGears give you two cleaning boxes and a base unit which over-energetically shakes the box. This may give a more thorough clean than a cyclonic wash station, but the force required to do this much shaking seems incredibly excessive for resin models. This is not so much gently rinsing the surface with cleaning fluid, it's throwing everything around and smashing your models together or against the sides of the container. Don't get me wrong, this is incredibly well built. I mean, it needs to be for the mechanics to successfully shift this much liquid at high speed. But was this even needed? My cheap ultrasonic cleaner does a better job of cleaning models without so much risk. And the reason you get two cleaning tanks is because each has got a screw valve in the base and a no return valve in the lid. When a wash is finished, simply put your full box on top of the empty one, release the screw valve, and all of your cleaning liquid flows from one box to the next, leaving you with naught but washed models in the top box. But I swear there was an earlier version of the HeyGears website suggesting this printing to cleaning system could be used somewhat glovelessly. But the plate doesn't fit in the curing boxes unless it's got really small models on and you wedge it in sideways. So you still need to scrape the models off the plate, and you need gloves for that. And even when rinsed, the models still need a final cure before you can handle them with naked skin, so you need gloves for that stage too. And when you flush your liquid from one box to the other, the first box will still have some small dregs of resin-contaminated liquid on the bottom of the valve hole, and they'll go all over your desktop or wherever you sit the box. So you're going to need gloves to clean that up too. So like I said, the engineering is great, ingenious even, but it's like HeyGears have spent all this time developing a pen to write in outer space when their competitors, and probably us too, are happy enough just to use a pencil. Now back inside the printer, and speaking of something else that could be looked at as over-engineering, let's talk about the resin system. So you may see that HeyGears resin comes in these funny shaped bottles. This is so that they can slide into the back of the machine upside down. I have the 1 litre bottles, but the cavity in the back is large enough for what seems to be 2 litre bottles, though these don't seem to have materialised yet. To put these in the machine, you remove the top lid from the bottle and flip it on its end. Don't worry about spillage at this point because each bottle has a spring valve in its second lid. Pop this in the machine and the Reflex recognises what type of their resin you're using. I'm assuming there's an RFID tag in the bottle or the label somewhere. What's really cool is that the printer also seems to be able to tell how much resin is in the system at all times too, even though I poured in my original bottle of resin. Now I don't know if this is due to sensors or an estimate based on when you put a bottle in or what, but it works. Now as far as spills when you flip the bottle upside down, well, remember that second protrusion I talked about at the back of the vat? That has a small post in it which pushes into the spring valve and releases the resin, quite similar to the mechanism that Nova 3D uses on their printers. But HeyGears have gone a step and then a jump and then a leap further by having an electromechanical sluice gate inside the printer between this protrusion and the rest of the vat. Now within the rear area of the vat, this protruding area, just like Nova 3D's solution, resin will stop flowing when the level of resin around it reaches the height of the neck thanks to how atmospheric pressure works. But throughout the print, this sluice gate opens when it needs to steadily fill the vat and then closes again. Now most people are probably thinking, isn't this just a bit of a step too far? Couldn't we just adopt the spring mechanism alone? Well, thanks to the sluice gate, the Reflex is able to pause the print as it refills, and this would ensure that there's no liquid movement during the curing stage of the printing process. And as part of this system, the printer also has a magnetic resin level sensor that attaches to the left side of the vat, and not only does this have conductive metal prongs to determine the current resin level, but it's got a built-in IR sensor too. And this, yeah, does seem a bit more than over the top to many people out there, but it's another level of precise control that can ensure not only successful, but nigh on perfect prints. However, when you're removing these resin bottles, you do need to wait and hope that once you've lifted the bottle out slightly, the drippings stop before you remove it fully, or you'll end up with drips on the inside of your machine where you don't want them. In reflection, a clear window on the inside back panel would have been helpful here because you can't see if it's still dripping behind opaque grey plastic. And the biggest question I've had about this printer, and probably one you've got right now, is can we use our own resin? And the answer is yes and no. It's yes if you are able to find a resin that just so happens to work with the exact settings used in the variety of resins that HeyGears has available. And you'll find out why that's a more difficult task than it seems shortly. But officially, the answer is no, in that A, HeyGears have expressly said you will void your warranty if you cause damage by using third-party resins, and B, you just can't set this printer up in the same way that you can any other resin printer. But before you say screw this, I'm out, please let me at least show you what all this means, because you haven't seen the print quality yet, nor have I talked about screen resolution, and that's for a very good reason. So anyway, one of the reasons you'll find it difficult to find compatible resins is because this printer works on a different UV wavelength to most others. Typical resin printers operate at a wavelength of 395 to 405 nanometers. The Reflex and its resins operate more in the range of 385 nanometers. And according to their own documentation, depending on which of their resins you use, this wavelength will dynamically change for the most efficient and sharp curing of that particular material. Now, I don't believe this means that the printer can't cure other resins because, well, I expect the curing station to use the same UV wavelength, and as I said, I've been using that for the last 8 months to successfully cure models printed on various other printers with various other resins. And the channel Greedy 3D has now shown this printer working with third-party resins too, so that's proof enough that it works. But as you don't have access to any of the exposure settings, you can't actually dial this printer in at all for the best exposure of any third-party resin. So with that third-party resin, you'll get whatever results you get from the settings predetermined by the different resin types available from HeyGears for this machine. And if you're happy getting non-optimal results from a third-party resin, then why go to the expense of a machine like this? You're losing all of the benefit it offers. So honestly, that's not a rhetorical question. If you do see value, what value do you see here? Now, I expect before long someone with one of these will find a directly compatible resin, and they'll prove the results by showing comparable exposure tests of this resin against HeyGears' own. But forgive me that I just don't have the time to do that myself for you. So ultimately, until someone does that work, which I'm sure will happen, and it'll happen before long, the answer is no. You can't use third-party resins, or at least if you do, you can't get optimal results from them. But wait, trust me, please trust me, this is still a milestone machine that everybody in resin printing should be fully aware of for several reasons. And the first one of those is print quality from this machine. Now for this review, I'm using HeyGears' newer and slightly cheaper PAP 10 resin, which by their own definition is specifically designed for miniatures. And this printer has given me the sharpest prints from any 3D printer I have ever used. Ever. And yes, I'm including DLP printers in that. And I know this because I printed the same exposure test on this machine as I have on every other machine I've reviewed so far. Now, not that I can calibrate this printer's exposure, but just as a point of reference. I'll explain what I mean shortly. For now, let's just focus on print quality. And I'm also sorry that it looks like this, but it cracked when I post-cured it because I left it in for 30 minutes with large models, like an idiot. I'm not perfect, just look at the things that we're going to look at. You can still see them. Now, immediately as I looked at this test, I could tell a couple of things. One is that this is ever so slightly overexposed, as we just about have more posts than holes. But that makes sense because perfectly balanced exposure is rarely, if ever, the best exposure. And you can see my video on setting up a 3D printer for more details on why. But this printed 14 posts noticeably, which is the most I've ever had on any printer ever, and 13 or maybe 13 and a half holes. And yeah, I'm saying half because if I look in certain lights, I can just about maybe see a recess there. But it's when I look at the bottom lines on this exposure test, that's what blew me away. Not only have all of the vertical lines rendered, all but the final 3 of the opposing recessed lines have rendered too. Now, many of you watching probably don't even realize just how incredible this is. But put simply, this is easily and measurably the sharpest printer I've ever used. And if this excites you, it's about to get better too. A lot better. Now, before I explain why, we need to talk about the thing that I normally open a video with, yet in this review I've left until now, and that's the screen size and resolution. Now, you won't find any specs on the HeyGears website listing screen size in inches or resolution or what K the screen is, and that's because HeyGears are an industrial level resin company who actually know what they're doing and have no need to rely on any of that marketing bull that the other brands use. And for more on this, check out my 12K printers are irrelevant video. Instead, all we're told is the XY pixel size, or as I like to call it, the AVC, which is 33 microns. And they also tell us the build volume, which is 192 by 121 by 220 millimeters. Now, many of you out there with some experience would liken this resolution to something like an Elegoo Mars 3. Well, again, just hang on. They also tell us here that the accuracy of a printed voxel is plus minus 16 microns, which means the true output quality of a voxel from this printer is in the range of 17 to 49 microns. Again, that sounds potentially quite bad, right? But look, HeyGears are at least telling us how accurate this is. Other brands aren't. And whatever their accuracies are, I bet none of them are anywhere near 16 microns based on the results I've seen with my bare eyes. And a macro lens. See, I haven't talked about this for a while, but I need to here just to put everyone in the same picture in case you don't know. Due to LCD bloat, which is resin reacting to off-cast light, no LCD printers are able to give a 1-to-1 screen pixel to printed voxel accuracy. That's why DLP printers exist and are so popular within industrial resin printing. it's because of the accuracy. There are so many variables within resin printing that affect the final result. Temperature, curing time, lift speeds, light source too. And this printer opened my eyes to just how much the UV wavelength can play a part too. And I've no idea how I could possibly emulate UV wavelength tests to dial in any other consumer grade printers or resins. But HeyGears, with their history in industry-grade printing, have shown that not only do they understand all of these variables, but have dialed in their settings and then some to ensure every print on this machine is as good as it can possibly be. And they've done all of that work for you. And if you've watched me for a while, you'll know that I thought, and even told people, LCD quality had all but peaked with 22 micron 12K printers. But this unit goes to show that even 33 micron printers under the right conditions can absolutely laugh in the face of their competition. And this printer all but proves that 8K, 12K, 14K, 16K, all those daft K printers with the high resolutions really just aren't quite doing the right things in order to give us better quality prints. All of that stuff we've been saying for the last year, 2 years, since 4K printers came out, this printer proves that point. And I'm trying not to be a sap about this, but it's blown me away. This is a premium printer for the premium purchaser. It's oh my god, wow, and there are drawbacks, but I haven't even shown you the true wow of this printer yet. And I promise I'm not just dragging this out. You'll understand when you see it in a mo, because this is a resin printing game changer for those of you who hate to clean up supports on your models, because HeyGears have all but eradicated that need too. Now, I talked in the intro about this being the Bamboo of resin printers, but that is a bit disingenuous to HeyGears because, well, I doubt in any way or in any meeting they've had, they decided they wanted to be like Bamboo at all. They've probably not even discussed them. They're just being themselves. But the result is similar because what Bamboo Lab delivered in FDM printing, HeyGears have all but done in resin printing, and it's got little to do with the printer itself, as incredible as that is on its own at a hardware level. It's all about the software, which means it's all about the slicer. Now, I could do a whole video and then some on this thing alone, but we are already double my normal video length and there's still some stuff to talk about. So I'm going to overview it, and the point is, they get it. Now, I spent so long with this printer being irritated by how it works, but in reflection, I've learned that my ire was due to no more than my own arrogance, having spent so long learning and understanding and showing how resin printers work. You know, just when something's come along that's so different, my natural reaction was to just fight against it. But does that not make me guilty of the same thing I complain about in my FDM review videos when people with years of FDM experience reject the more user-oriented Bamboo approach? It does, and so it's a good job I checked myself before I made a video dispelling this brand's approach to resin printing, because yeah, this is pretty much everything we've been wanting. So this slicer, Blueprint, it connects directly to your printer or printers, all of which are stored in your cloud account. You can hold your projects in the cloud or locally on your PC and transfer files via USB if you wish, and you can even transfer prints to the printer via LAN or cloud. It's your call. And this is a proper integration too. You can actually view all of the printer info like serial number, you can download logs, you can view usage stats and stuff, and it's all useful info. When a slice is complete, you get preview images from multiple angles showing you what will be printed. It's really great. Though, because this isn't set up the same way a normal slicer is, the process of printing works a little differently to what many people are currently used to. So before you begin adding models, you actually need to create a new project and you need to select your printing parameters before you begin anything else. And yeah, you can change these later, but let's just go through them. So you'll choose the printer type, I'm assuming they'll have more coming in the future, and you also select the resin tank style, and I'll explain the pulsing release resin tank in a mo because that bit's the game changer. Then you select what type of model you're printing, and this then suggests various material types. So for miniatures, which I'm printing, the only option they recommend is HeyGears UltraPrint PAP 10. Once you've selected that, you then choose your layer thickness, 50 microns as standard for speed and 30 microns for a bit more detail. And once the project's set up, you can then add your models and go through the very clear and almost guided workflow denoted by the tabs at the top of the screen: prepare, support, layout, and slice. Within Prepare, you can move and orient your models, but I wouldn't overlook the top two options for Repair and Printability. The repair process analyzes the model and even explains any issues it finds, along with what those issues kinda mean. Though, I do wish this would then link you to an external page or document which explains this in a lot more detail, because many of these current explanations left me wondering, okay, so what should I do about it? But still, having at least this much explains a little in the slicer, and it's on its way to exactly what Bamboo does by telling you what the potential issues are in real time, so you can take educated action to resolve problems before they occur in the printer itself. It just needs to do a little bit more of actual educating before this is the perfect platform. Yet already it is still a light year ahead of Chitubox or Lychee. Now, the second tab isn't normally something I cover, but it's kind of the reason why I'm covering this slicer at all. It's HeyGears' automatic support algorithm, which is by far the best thing I have ever seen. Again, I initially rejected this, but after spending time with it, it makes a lot more sense. You see, I found it weird that I couldn't actually manipulate any of the actual support posts themselves. You can only select points on the model where you want the supports to connect. But actually, the algorithm does such an amazing job of orientation and support angle itself that I never needed to change anything. The few times there was some slight encroachment of the support across the model surface, it was so minuscule that it was irrelevant to the actual print. Put it this way, I typically only print pre-supported models because I can't be bothered to support them myself in reviews. With this printer, I've opted for the unsupported models, and I've preferred this slicer to support them for me. But there's also another reason for that, which I'll come on to shortly. And I swear, I promise, I swear to you, I am not trying to drag this out now. You'll see why it makes more sense in this order when you look back over the video at the end. Trust me, please. I hate feeling like I'm one of them dickheads who just keeps going, oh yeah, I'll get onto that in a minute, and never gets to the point. But I hope you've seen that we've already covered so many points, and the only part of the video that's actually a waste of your time is this bit where I'm explaining why I'm not wasting your time, even though I'm wasting your time by explaining it. I'm now apologizing to you to preempt any negative comments I get for this video that I'm going to get anyway no matter what I do. So sorry, not sorry. This is a really complicated printer that does so many things in so many new ways that I have to explain it all. It's taking a while. Yeah, it is what it is. So moving on to the layout tab, this is completely automated and it doesn't take long to orient all of your models across the surface of the plate and ensure everything fits. And when you get to the slice function, it does all this in the background and gives you a pop-up when the slicing is complete. You can then send this to the printer via LAN or cloud. But the fact that slicing has become a background task means you can get on with another project whilst you're waiting. And if you've got issues with a print, there's a feedback request module built right into the slicer, so you can upload your slice file and say, hey, I'm having an issue with this. HeyGears can then use that to gather feedback and respond to you, and they've already improved their platform and resin settings due to the feedback I gave about printing miniatures when I had the prototype unit, because we were initially limited to only 50 micron layer heights when I printed models in that video. And trust me, this is just an overview of the features. All in all, the app is so smooth. Even now, years down the line, both Lychee and Chitubox have so many daft little visual bugs that it annoys the hell out of me. They're both just such janky apps still. This is a smooth and responsive, well-built professional application that shows HeyGears are taking this seriously where all other brands are still just playing. Again, believe me, I've only just scratched the surface and I could and maybe should do another video on this slicer, but right now we haven't got all day and you want to know if this printer's worth buying. Well, one final thing before we conclude, and I promise this is the last thing, it's the Pulsing Release Module, or PRM. This add-on accessory, which costs more than most people's printers, is an absolute game changer in resin printing. Now, depending on how new your Reflex is, you may already have the rubber gasket needed to fit this in the machine. I had to install mine separately, which was only a case of peeling off the frame around the display, putting the gasket in place and fitting a new frame that you get with it. It was that easy. You connect the PRM up to the printer with its control and power wire, and then you fit the air hose. Now what this is basically an air compressor that constantly runs and pumps air into the printer at a frequency that's in line with the lift and retraction of the build plate. Now unfortunately this compressor is so loud and constant that I just cannot be in the same room as the printer as it's printing, which I normally can do because I've got extraction set up. Now a V2 of this PRM should really include a tank, an air tank, to store the compressed air so it's not pumping for the whole print. But yeah, what this does is it pumps air between the release film and the LCD. Just before it lifts each layer, this air then removes the vacuum that is formed by the release film touching the LCD and significantly reduces the pull forces needed to remove cured resin from said film. Now, if you didn't quite follow that, because it is a little bit complex and I kind of shot through it, I do recommend you use the brilliant YouTube feature of going back and watching it again until it's clear what I meant. But look, here's the benefit. The result is that you're able to print models with much thinner contact points on your supports. Now, where other brands use frosty detail reducing ACF films to achieve a similar result by also reducing the required peel forces, one, the ACF solution is just nowhere near as good because you still need more pull force, but this method keeps your print sharp because it doesn't use frosty ACF. And it lets you reduce your support contacts points down to almost nothing. I feel I need to put this into perspective quickly. If you've seen my supporting miniatures video, I talk about heavy, medium and light supports in Lychee. Now on the advice of Dan from the Lion's Tower Miniatures, who has created some of the best supported miniatures I've ever seen, he taught me how to support miniatures. I've now changed the tips of my supports to 480, 280 and 200 microns for heavy, medium and light supports respectively. Now within Blueprint, the slicer here, do you remember how I was talking about how I now opt to use their auto supports over pre-supported models? Well, that uses 200 micron supports already by default. When using the PRM, I'm able to get working support tips as thin as 100 microns, and I'm able to do that easily. Put it this way, in Lychee, I only used the small 200 micron supports sparingly when I wanted them as imperceivable as possible. At 100 microns, you can't even tell they were there. Imagine that, resin printing without having to do any support cleanup at all. That's what the PRM does. Now I've also tried 50 micron supports and I started to get semi-successful before another app on my PC crashed the computer mid-slice and corrupted the file, and I wasn't starting from the beginning again. I think I was about 4 or 5 prints in. Now don't get me wrong, there are still some slight little specks and spots on your model, but these are so tiny and so imperceivable that it's like they're not even there. But like I said, when I use this printer now, I've stopped using pre-supported models and I opt for this slicer's auto supports instead. Now, yes, sometimes I get small failures that I need to tweak by adding a few more supports in a particular area, but when the result is a 3D print with next to no support mark cleanup required, that saves me so much post-processing time, and well, time is money. Is that time worth it to you for the additional cost of the resin in this printer? Well, here we are at the end of our journey, and I know it's been a long one, but I'm sure you'll agree there's a lot going on here. The HeyGears UltraCraft Reflex is not only better than any other printer I've ever used, but much like Bamboo's printers, the Reflex is the first printer that feels like a real approachable product for this day and age. It's the iPhone to all the Nokia N95 users, because it's realized what so many of us have wanted for so long: the best possible quality from resin printing with the smallest amount of user interaction needed to go from unboxing to incredible print. There's no need to tweak or tinker with this at all. In fact, you can't, even if you wanted to. Just unbox it, throw models in the app, go through the steps it presents to you, and get the best quality prints available on any current consumer grade LCD printer. But should you buy it? Well, Let's assume if you're watching this and are therefore actually considering it even after you've seen the price, and now you understand that you need to buy their bottles of resin ranging from £70 or local equivalent probably about $80 and up per bottle. Like, seriously, HeyGears, we shouldn't need to pay you for the proprietary bottle and spring mechanism every time. Maybe just sell us some refill packs, please. But again, say you're okay with paying all that so you don't need to do any legwork and ensure you'll always have the best quality prints. Well, HeyGears' approach is here a bit of a double-edged sword. Whilst they take a lot of complexity away from you, there is a borderline arrogance to this by removing all control from the user entirely. For me, on my first plate of test prints, I did have a model fail, which I supported myself in another slicer. I've had no issues printing this model on any other printer, and you'll have seen it in nearly every recent review I've done. But instead of re-supporting a failed pre-supported model, I often just up the exposure a little on my printers to ensure success. I can't do that here. And when removing a model from the plate, several of them shattered on the base layers. I'd normally lower my base exposure settings here because I've seen this happen on other printers where I have a known good and flexible resin, but I've overcured the base layers. I think it's also the reason my exposure test cracked. I'd want to lower the exposure just a little bit, but I can't do that here. And when I print miniatures, I still very much prefer the properties of Wargamer resin because we spent forever developing it to have the best properties for miniatures where it's the right balance of sharp and flexible, where the PAP 10 resin here is sharp, but it's just too brittle after curing for intricate pieces not to snap easily. This is great for master prints or display prints only. I actually preferred their ABS like PAU 10 for usable miniatures, and that's the stuff I used in my preview video, which is more flexible but not quite as sharp. But that stuff, well, it absolutely stinks. I think something halfway between these would be better, though I'm yet to find a resin company who actually understands what miniature printers need in a resin, which is why we had one made. Anyway, what I'm saying is, I'd like to use my own resin, but I can't do that here. Now, HeyGears are right. Most of the time, they have the absolute best resin settings available for their resins down to the nth degree, but the rest of the time, for those odd few occasions where you may just need to make a small tweak or change to something for whatever random scenario or reason presents itself to you, you're stuck thanks to a whole new set of limitations you just don't get from any other modern printer. And I know that dialing in a printer can be seen as a pain. Trust me, I do it more than most people, but it's not like it's that hard, is it? I mean, I've made a step-by-step walkthrough in just a 20-minute video, showing just how easy it is. And once it's dialed in for a particular resin, that's it. It's done forever. So is it really worth all this extra expense? I'd say this printer is still a top pick for those people who have the money for it and its materials, and those amongst you who simply want to print models to the highest possible quality degree whilst learning as little as possible about the process. And there's nothing wrong with releasing a printer that operates more like a tool for your hobby than a machine which becomes a hobby in itself. I've championed this approach in the FDM world, and I do want the same in the resin sphere too. I guess this sudden souring of my attitude from an overall positive video comes from disappointment because of the lockdown approach. Well, that coupled with the material price more so than the machine price. And it's because this will undoubtedly limit this printer's reach in the marketplace. And whilst I expect them to sell hundreds of units, I want this printer to sell in the thousands because enough people investing in this platform and brand, it has the potential to significantly disrupt the resin marketplace and push all 3D resin printer technology forward. But what do you think? Is this the machine for you? I don't think there's a wrong answer here, but I expect the results will be somewhat polarizing. I'd love to know why it is or isn't your pick, and I'm certain HeyGears will also read the comments on this video, so please drop one below with your thoughts. If you are as impressed by this as I am and you want this printer in your lineup and you've got the money to continually pay for the materials it requires, then please, I would appreciate you clicking the affiliate link in the description of this video before you go ahead and finalize that purchase. Again, I get a commission on that, but I hope you'll agree that I've really put the work in for this one. I want to say thanks to our members and thanks to you for watching. If you got this far, give yourself a pat on the back. Again, I don't think I should apologize for the length of this video. I think we got to most of the points, apart from the point where I was apologizing for not getting to the points. That was the only bit that didn't get to the point. Anyway, I'm tired of talking. You're probably tired of listening. You've just had your mind blown by a printer and there's a lot to think about. Yeah, so thank you for getting this far. Really appreciate your time and effort. If you have stuck this far and it was helpful, please this time drop a comment below, click like, click subscribe if you haven't already. Just let people know, let me know that this is good. We are literally about to hit 50,000 subscribers, and I think by the time this video goes live, after it takes forever to edit it, we probably have reached that milestone, which is why I've already printed myself out the resin play button, which YouTube don't give out, but I feel was appropriate for this video. And yes, this was also printed on the UltraCraft Reflex, and I used auto supports. Thanks again. Until next time, I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy asking him to love her. Fohammer out.